Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11, and of course we're playing as Germany, and we're kicking butt in Egypt. Now, I took a few days break, so I don't exactly remember where we were. I know we had a crash. Some various things. I'm not quite sure why. Obviously the game is partially, well, yeah, definitely partially at fault here. No matter what, or is at fault. I don't know how much of it is the mod. There is a difference between the mod and the game. And I say that because of various things here. Okay, we're attacking. We do have. Did we get the? No, we didn't get this up in time to attack there yet. They're coming very slowly. Why are they coming so slowly? Terrain. Okay. So it's slowing down. Partially also the heavy artillery. Okay, well, let's continue this. Okay, we won the Battle of Alexandria. I know I played a little bit beyond this at one point in the very recent past. Why I say I don't remember exactly what we were doing here. You can come down this way. But the British forces are doomed. Doomed. 4-engine transport plane prototypes improved. Okay, that's good. We're going to stop that. But oh yeah, we want mid-air refueling. Now, a few of us have talked a little bit about what would have, could have, maybe happened if. And that's a big part of why we play these games. And could Rommel have won in the desert? Yes, he could have. We saw a larger, reasonably well-equipped Italian force defeated by British, simply by the British attacking and the Italians being confused in chaos with poor little leadership. And that was sort of the first Italian invasion coming into, the British just defeated the force, overran it. Read a recent description of it. It just basically attacked them at night, and most Italians were sort of caught in their bed, and the leaders could, they didn't, they're in the Italian army. There was sort of, oh, the officers, they're off over in that area, and all the rest of the guys are over here, and, not heavily associated, so they were never able to get in command of their troops in the speed of the battle that happened, and the ferocity of the battle. But the British, with a much smaller, and I'm trying to avoid inferior and superior, because obviously the smaller force kicks the larger force's butt. So you could say, oh, well, hey, put the wrong guy in charge, or have the wrong attitude, Rommel can win. One of the problems with the, let's see if we can keep playing this a little bit while we're talking. One of the problems with the desert campaign is the, whether it was the guy in was it Harold Alexander in Alexandria, or whoever, sorry, I forget who, but some of the British forces here were telling, back here, we're telling what the Western Desert guys, wherever they were, oh, well, you're going to be attacked tomorrow. Oh, no, you can't be, no, you must have wrong information, or whatever. And they weren't trusting the information because they didn't know where the information was coming from, or you know, how could you know this stuff? Well, they weren't telling the guy out in the field about Ultra, you know, the Enigma decrypts. The sort of leading office back here did know the source. So that was, well, that's what, you know, and then sometimes it was wrong. Thank you, motorcycle. Sometimes it was wrong because sometimes it was, you know, Germany telling Rommel to halt, and Rommel continues to attack or something. You know, so sometimes it's was wrong, but yes, supplies. Yes. So it wasn't 100% right. But there was a, you know, a lack of information and knowledge about what, or where the information was coming from, and all of that stuff going on. So, well, you know, let's send these guys. And so you have some of that, and so you could easily have some bad decisions being made. And Rommel winning. Obviously he didn't. Obviously the British didn't make enough bad decisions. And then would that have changed the outcome of the war? We're not talking about, at least I'm not talking about, Germany lasts an extra 3 months or 6 months, or, you know, some sort of slightly different result. Of course you could have, yes, and yes, and we've seen this before, Cafe Rene. I think we talked about this before because we've had a couple of things, so these are happening again for this stream. Yeah, I don't know that we had, here's group middle before, but we want that. Not right now, thanks. Really hope I've covered all these in a recent episode. Because I know I've talked about them, but I had to kill a couple of things, and I think I replayed everything right. Remade stuff. So, yes, visit from there. And like mentioning that, the Americans were reading the Japanese, you know, radio mail back and forth, decrypting it, so they knew what the Germans were telling the Japanese, and then the Americans were telling other people. Not that it was coming from the Japanese, but just the information. And so that can be wrong because the Germans may not understand what's going on correctly, even in their own forces, or they may not be telling the Japanese correctly. But still. So, you know, but it's still a very good source. Flak Tower Gustav, yes. Reorganize, yes. League of Fuhrer Africa, yes. Yeah, British embargo on Bulgaria, yes. The fall of Cairo, yes. Convoys, we've talked about that. I know. This is the various, and we'll take a veteran. So, you know, we can have a slightly different result in the war, but will it change the outcome with Rommel? Well, Rommel wanted to come and do sort of a, you know, a southern hook around into Russia. And if you've sort of wondered or thought that couldn't do it, or it wouldn't affect the outcome of the war. Well, actually, winning the war I contend that the Germans could have won the war, and I don't mean simply by the Allies completely, totally screwing up or some sort of thing like that. I really think the Allies could have won the war. I mean, the Axis. So, yes. Okay, yes, we want this. We get this for capturing Alexandria. Boots polished, yes. Not right now. That gives us There's some captured equipment here. Oh yes, our monthly outbreak of partisans. Okay, we've got to be moving guys a little more. What have been waiting for? Oh no, we don't need to go up there. These guys up here. You can battle down. Oh, false in the sea. Use it battle. That'll turn over to be Hungarian territory. I don't know if that's a bad thing, but so they've had an outbreak of rebels too. If the Germans defeat the Soviets, that can radically change the outcome of the war, and I definitely believe that that was very possible. Could Rommel have moved? Well, with the Africa Corps, that was 2 or 3 divisions, 3 or 4 divisions, whatever, helping out with the Italians. Could they have made it into here? No, I don't think so. Not that you... Well, this part of Iraq is highly undeveloped, even to this day. It's just a single sort of road, and I don't even know if it's a properly paved road. I think it is, but I don't know when that came into being as a properly paved road. And we're talking moving supplies across it that would support multiple divisions. You don't do that on a few camels. You don't do that on just a few trucks slowly driving across deserts on a track. But there were trains and rails that were moving up into this more northerly part, and roads. Had you showed up here, I think you could have easily gotten through Vichy or Free French, by that time controlled territory, and easily gotten into Iraq. Now, getting across the mountains and whatnot through Persia into Soviet Union. Again, those 2 or 3 divisions, not effectively. But had you cleared out the Eastern Mediterranean by taking Alexandria and taking the Suez, trust me, you're going to see about every single significant British surface vessel leave this area. They're going to either head across the Mediterranean or they're going to head out through the Suez. A few, motor torpedo type boats aren't going to do too much, and they're going to be swamped pretty quickly, though, they might continue to try operate for port defense for a little while. And submarines are going to eventually lose their base. Now, so even if they're over here, getting to blocking supplies moving across here is going to be different, or difficult. Excuse me, hiccups. Close air support prototypes, and that's grayed out. So you're going to be able to move a lot more in armored cars of supplies once you clear out. Okay, China's gone. And Osterkamp's birthday, I think we covered that. Petrol rate shooting, no. Japanese-Soviet non-aggression pact signed, okay. And we've read that. And yes, we want to control our future territory. So, and briefly holding out on Cyprus or something might for a little while get those submarines still operating. But those are going to be things that are not going to happen, or are going to be decline. Energy, sure. Sure, you can have that. Okay, and that. So they could have easily reinforced Rommel a lot more once you get rid, and you could easily, Cyprus is doomed. It's not a. They didn't have all of the remainder Greek forces, and they didn't have the recently withdrawn British forces from Greece. Trying to talk and civil defense. Yes, let's do civil defense. Sitting in Cyprus. I think there was marine activation. We want to do that. So I think there's very little British. Oh, good. Create the 10th. Yes, we want to do that. Create the 20th. Yes, we want to do that. Now we want to refit the 3rd. Now that we've no longer got to have them in there. And this. Okay. Hitler issues Directive 28, although Operation Marita forced to abandon the foothold on the European continent. Hitler remained concerned about RAF attacks. Oh, okay, this is for, that's right, for the Crete, which we were just talking about. You know, so I think they're just slim occupation type forces on Cyprus, and that can go down pretty quickly. Okay, no, we're gonna, no need. And we want to look at getting these guys to the top, because some of them are mostly built and others are just a little bit built, but still get them going. And I want to save. And so I think it could have had a significant effect on the outcome of the war. Because had you, nope, where did we lose a province? Oh, here. Alright, you're good. You attack here. Get them pinned. Had you come in here with a, you know, corps of mountain troops, a motorized corps, and whatnot, early enough, before they had rigged all of the, hey, be ready to blow up Baku if the, you know, Germans get to here or wherever they may have been, you know, well away from it. Before they set all that up, their Germany could have secured all of that oil, and very early on. We've talked about this before, I know. So yes, we want the manpower. No, we don't need the food rationing. Establish the Pan-American Security Zone. And yes, do you want Jaeger divisions? Yes, we want those. I think those are on the map. Yes, very good. Fairly elite Jaeger divisions. Still may, yeah. I think we'll send you just down to here. Oh, we need to put a leader in charge of you. Let's find a good level 2 guy. Fairly elite unit, but if we can get him into some fairly good action. Bring him up. I don't know that we need a cold weather guy because we're moving towards the med. And not only do you potentially secure Baku for your usage, you know, so if you're Germany taking Baku, you deny it to the Soviets. And Fortress. Oh, yeah, river crossing, I guess. Ditmar. And this is a mistake the Japanese made, and it's comes down to Yamamoto and his sort of mistake. This should be. We're going to go back and redo that other division. Come down here. We'll put you on boats and get you down there faster. But well, we got. I saw a better guy. Let's go get. There we go. He made the mistake. Well, sorry, jumping around a bit. Yamamoto had went to school in the United States and college, so he spoke English well enough to go to lectures. I think he had an accent and all, but he spoke English quite well. So he knew America very well, and in a way he may have known it too well, which gets to the mistake. He knew America had plenty of oil and plenty of fuel. The U.S. had the greatest oil production in the world at the time. So, hey, oil's not a problem. So it's not a priority for Japan to attack America's oil. Well, the problem comes there is, in Pearl Harbor, it planned, because he's the primary architect of my understanding. I'm not saying there wasn't both guys that were figuring out more operational details as well as some other guys feeding him stuff, but he's the overall guy responsible for the Pearl Harbor thing, and it's sink the carriers. Well, they show up, there's no carriers, so plan B, and they did this real well, is to, no carriers, well, sink battleships. Who cares about destroyers or whatever? I mean, if they show up and there was no battleships, presumably they would have tried to sink destroyers or something if there were any. Because you don't fly over and go, "Oops, sorry, our sneak attack is on the wrong day. We'll come back tomorrow when you're there." So he understood getting the capital ships. That's the real point. And doing that, and then they strike the air bases and whatnot, just mostly with, shall we say, more fighter type aircraft, as opposed to torpedo bombers and carrier-based bombers, but they do drop bombs, and that's mostly to disrupt. Ooh, bastards! Sinks our convoys. Okay, to disrupt immediate fighter counterattack, because there was supposed to sort of be a second wave coming in, but whether it's the second wave and there's a little bit of confusion, at least in my mind, whether the second wave was going to target it or not. But there were well exposed oil tanks, the big sort of huge round oil tanks up on, normally put them a bit on the hill so that use gravity feed to fuel the fleet. And they were perfectly out in the open, perfectly seen. And they were either a third priority, I think, at best, or not a priority at all, if I remember. I'm not exactly sure, but it was after everything else on the plans. Well, because Yamamoto knew that the U.S. had plenty of oil, and that wasn't an issue like it is for the Japanese. Well, it would have been a huge issue had they taken out, because that was all of the oil. There was, in substantive amounts, obviously the ships, have whatever they had at that day for fuel, and they may be keeping themselves topped up, and there's a few other ships in port and whatever, but that's about all of the oil. It would have taken them, my understanding is, like 6 months or more to, if they had blown those oil tanks up, to, one, put in new oil tanks, and two, ship out, just because of the shipping situation, ship out more oil to there. So you couldn't have operated the carriers or the battleships or anything like that in the Pacific had you taken out the oil, because that was all of the oil that was there then. And it would have taken a significant process to bring in more oil. Well, you know, so you get this kind of situation that may seem for the Allies, you know, somebody sort of and building sort of a model. Well, America would just send the Soviets more oil. Well, of course they would have. But how much would that have taken, you know, more shipping? And yeah, you can do 50-gallon oil drums. That's sort of what they're called. And load those aboard any sort of freighter and chug that freighter, any sort, whether it's a fast or slow one or whatever, towards a Soviet port somewhere. Of course you could do that. But if you do that, you're taking that ship and all of that stuff away from maybe shipping oil to, you know, a Pacific island somewhere to operate ships out of or something. As well as, now that you've got it to a port, how are you going to get it to the battlefield? Well, through trains. And you're already moving those trains to move supplies in and out of the port. Of course, you're using trains come from the oil fields too and whatnot. So, but still, it's clogging up the rail lines, the long Vladivostok or the coming out through Murmansk. You know, there's basically one rail line coming through here. How many trains can you move? I don't know at what capacity level they were operating at and when, but it's at a capacity level, and it's only so much. So you're starting to jam it up. So by denying it to the Soviets, you are going to affect the Soviet tempo of offensive operations. You just are going to do that. That is not a question at all. Now, that alone isn't going to win you the war, but it's going to help. And if you have other things going on, then it will help even more. Okay, raise more flak units. Yes, I looked at this before, and August, oh god, yeah. No, I think that was one I was complaining that I thought was too big. And yes, you may have the supply. Soviets. Good, we are pushing. Ah, okay, this I believe is new, at least for this episode. You know you attack it. Okay, the Corinthian plebiscite found this medal that was struck for this. Well, we already sort of have national territory here because of the event to give us port in the Mediterranean, but we can look at some of these terrains. They are Yugoslav provincial claims here, and well, let's look at revolt risk here. Come on, well, there we go. We can see here. Now, this area had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Germany invaded and occupied Slovenia in April 41. The ethnic German Corinthian Slovenes voted on whether or not they wanted to become citizens of the Third Reich. Overwhelmingly, they did. This plebiscite was called the Die Kattener Volksabstimmung 1941. Sorry, I'm butchering that. You can see that sort of something up here. The medal, and that's just sort of a map of the area, sort of a periodish one. So we can hold the plebiscite or not. We're going to, of course, do that. That was just now. which we should, I think, yes. Provincial claims here, notice, and the map will change briefly, but some of these provinces now have German cores. Not, I mean, eventually you go into more Yugoslav, but up here. So, we've got cores there now. And that was designed for if you were just under more normal situations. But hey, okay, the 15th Panzer Division was formed in November 1940 from the 33rd Infantry Division sent to Libya in spring 41 and took part in fighting in North Africa. This division was transported to Libya in April 41. General Erwin Rommel's Deutsches Afrika Korps with the 21st Panzer and the 90th Lick Division. It surrendered in Tunisia. Well, we're not going to surrender it in Tunisia. And I believe this is another one of these. Get here. Oh, good. Proper DAC regiments. And as I said before, wish we'd have DAC armor again. Or back like they did. Not to be able to build it, but just to have some. Because it was, to some degree, specialized armor. Not that the tanks were any different than regular tanks, and I don't know how I would do this in Hearts of Iron 4. No, long key. Okay, we'll just sweep down there. But, just, they're putting more fuel cans and more water cans on trucks and tanks and whatever. And if not training, maybe a bit more experience on how to operate in these rough environments. Waiting for the fence to, well, okay, well, you probably, while you're waiting for supplies. They didn't move the SA this far south. Now, there was some specific, and they were very anti-partisan operation, SA in this area, somewhat related to that plebiscite thing. And I recently read a book, Stormtroopers, A New History or something. It's titled very similar to that. All of the German ambassadors to this part of the world, to Bulgaria, to Hungary, to well, Romania, to Hungary, and to Croatia, they were all basically SA generals. I don't know. I'm really Sturmbannführers or whatever, but the sort of general level, you know, being a general in the SA. They were all done that. And there were various reasons for that. Partially to give Lutz a bone, you know. Well, okay, yeah, you can have your guys be the ambassadors to here, kind of thing. But it was also gets back to this sort of Volksgemeinschaft thing that they were working on with Germany, of trying to get all the Germans into this racial view thing. Now, obviously, these are to predominantly non-German. I say predominantly because particularly in Hungary, there are, and it's, again, my understanding, it's very diffused, not just like, you know, pick out one province, but it was equivalent of multiple provinces of people, but they were diffused around that were German ethnic Germans in there. But it was to very much push these countries to follow racial policies of the Nazis. So it isn't trying to get Romanians to speak German. It isn't trying to get them to, I don't know, be like that. But it's to clear out the Jews. It's to clear out the various unwanted groups and elements that were unwanted by the Nazis. And at some point or another, Croatia just like, oh goody, we get to kill Jews. Basically, they have some of these god-awful murder camps. I think maybe better than death camps. At least one or two of those are set up in Croatia. Pretty bad. The Stasi were pretty damn bad. At one point or another, basically both Romania and Hungary allow the collections of their Jewish populations in the countries. Resist for a while. The one country that mostly resists until the end and has none of its citizenry Jews evacuated or whatever was Bulgaria. Bulgaria basically said, nope, you don't get to mess with our Jews. Oh, you can have all the foreign Jews you want that are in Bulgarian territory, but no Bulgarian Jews. Basically, that meant was, and mostly from this part, Jews that lived in territories that only were recently occupied Bulgaria, but did not have previous Bulgarian citizenship. So there were, I think, in the thousands sent out, but they weren't the sort of core Bulgarian Jews, if you will, or something. They were sort of the one country. But this all comes, sort of the myth is after 1935, for sure, all the SA is just a drinking society of old comrade Nazi types that we did no war crimes. No, they continued. They very much continued. And the SA were involved, mostly I think up in this region here, in anti-partisan activities, suppression. They were definitely involved in those kinds of things in regions of Poland and whatever. And this is like during the war. Much more active than you normally just think of the SS doing things like that. Now, the SA, very much. But this gets back to the book Hitler's Monsters, and which I found I found the whole book very interesting. But I found it interesting that the Germans traditionally see werewolves as good creatures and vampires as evil creatures, where we in the West would see both as bad creatures. But they saw, going way back, and I think, and they sort of tied it into werewolves as being a type of berserker, a Viking type berserker. Now it was more of a bear berserker, a bear. But the Germans sort of saw it as that, as sort of the werewolves were the protectors of the folk, and the vampires were bad things that sucked off the life of the society. And a lot of the higher up Nazis took this as being very real. I almost said literal, but I mean very real. Now, not necessarily that there were a vampire that had big sharp pointy teeth that bit people in the neck and sucked their blood. No, they saw it as this sort of racial vampire that the Jew or other peoples would come in and through intermarriage mingle the blood and suck the life out of the good people that way. Again, not in some sort of biting, sucking blood necessarily, but there are reports of vampirism in Nazi files dealing with various guerrilla movements. And these are very serious reports of what they believe are literal cases of vampirism. Whether it's a person that can turn into a bat and fly away, no, but as in guerrillas sucking the blood out of and eating the blood out of the victims that they attacked, with machine guns or whatever. And to the point of even some stuff happening in city parks, and they capture some of these people. And so this is all going on, and there's very real reports of this in files. And to in case of like a couple of guerrilla women in, like, I don't know if it was a Belgrade park or one of the major cities, I forget. Could have been Kosovo or Sarajevo or Kosovo or whatever, I don't know. One of the cities, but in sort of a park, sort of going mad in the middle of it and start biting someone. Again, not that they had any reports of anybody changing into a bat or anything else, but just literally sort of attacking and biting, like at the neck of somebody, and that they sort of their sort of thought was that they thought they sort of became delusional, and that these were guerrillas, and they sort of, I guess, as we would say in a modern sort of thing, is a PTSD type flashback situation that was triggered in a park. Because they sort of intimated in one report that it was sort of a wild part of a city park, trees, bushes, whatever. And they sort of reverted and attacked and were biting at least one or more of these people that they attacked. And that their conclusions at some of this point is that these were guerrillas, women, and I don't know quite how good their evidence for it, that these were guerrilla women or not, but that they were doing this. Again, not necessarily having supernatural powers, but just that there was cases of vampirism going on. And this all sort of blends into this sort of weird mix of stuff going on down here and the way they're viewing it. I don't know. It just, as I learn more about how the people view things going on, just fascinates me. And especially some of the recent books, and I've been very careful on what I've been reading. There's been, several, Nazis and UFOs and whatnot, and I'm sort of looking at some of and I go and look at the author, and it's UFO this, UFO that, UFO. Okay, I don't want to even look at the book. I'm looking at books that are well documented and are done by people who have history type professor backgrounds, and like Hitler's Monsters. It's a salacious title, but all of this stuff, every single thing he gives a reference source. This was said in letter between Rosenberg and Derrier, or between Himmler and Rosenberg or something, and so he's citing every single one of these sources. Or these are this is a a file report of partisan women attacking people in the city, and supposedly they bit them, whether that was just a street fighting, because they don't have any, because the way it's described is they sort of flipped out as opposed to a planned attack or something like this, that they flipped out and did this. And since they didn't have any, bayonets or pistols or, machine guns, they attacked and they were biting these people. Is it a case of vampirism? That was sort of what they were saying in the report. And that they're saying that there's other reports of different things, and they go through the different stuff. Now, the author's not saying that these were vampires. These are just saying this is the reports that they were being put up the line. So I'm looking at very well documented stuff is where I'm getting this kind of things. So don't think I'm going nutty here and thinking that Dracula is out there. But it's totally puts away, in my opinion, completely 100%, any movie that has Nazi vampires is completely false. Nazis were anti-vampire but pro-werewolf. And then you may be thinking, oh, well, this is just gamer being silly. Well, there was and this is where they talk about this stuff. There was a werewolf movement in the Saarland particularly, but in the occupied Rhineland, that was anti-French. And this werewolf movement was a guerrilla-type movement in which regular sorts of people would, at night, no, they didn't put on costumes, but would do guerrilla actions against French occupation and sort of do revenge occupation, so that if, that French soldier supposedly raped this German woman, we're going to go get us that guy, or another French soldier, just to, threaten them back, make, as a counterattack. And so you have this, and this is before the rise of the Nazis. This is like in the 1920s. They were having this werewolf movement. Again, this wasn't, people weren't really taking this seriously, that they were changing into wolves or even putting on a wolf costume. This is just people having they were using werewolf symbology for guerrilla type actions. And this was supposedly reaching back to German cultural past as werewolves as the protectors. Fast forward to the end of the war, and I've long known this, the sort of Hitler Youth werewolf movement of a guerrilla resistance movement was organized at the end of the war with the occupation coming in. So the werewolf stuff was to be, you know, look like a nice passive German during the day, and at night come out and do actions against our evil oppressors. So symbolically and, you know, sort of metaphorically and whatever, and sort of this kind of thing, whether, and yes, there are some that are sort of a bit more loony that probably did believe in real werewolves. Not that they're, again, I'm not saying they exist, I'm just saying that probably some of the more loony, if you will, of the top level of the Nazis may have actually believed they really existed, but they looked at this symbology. So werewolf Nazis, yes. Vampire Nazis, no, never. Because the vampires are bad people as being Nazis. Okay. Colonel von Strom. Colonel Kurt von Strom has been sent to command the occupation of Nouvion and the area around it. He and his loyal aide, Captain Hans Geering, must keep the peace to allow the German army to mass troops in the east. Okay, so now part of the reason I put these here is because I want to make sure that they are working. Okay, right, because they weren't working last time. So we have this sort of unique, basically unupgradable, weaker than, well, in the olden days, you know, I'm saying that specifically, you had this type of garrison unit at 3,000 men, but you did not have this type of garrison unit of 800 men. So I created this as sort of a weak garrison unit. So we have von Strom with the Nouvion garrison here. Okay, striking. Okay, strike of the 100,000. Striking was the most common form of passive resistance in Belgium. Often took place in symbolic dates. Workers, Germans increasing. Okay, so I want to look here. Okay, well, we already have this. We're getting more. Reducing local resources until whenever. Because those, that the 68 is basically to the end of the game. Unless it's, and I say until whenever because it very well may be removed. Because I use that as a thing as well. Just put it there to then go, oh, yep, we're done. And then, you know, have the effects removed at some point. Not quite sure who I want to have here, but okay, good offensive sort of guy. Yes, you may have metal, Finland, all you want. Okay. Now, of course, we're using a rather heavy amount of motorized forces that would have been, I would say, sort of crippling had they not been available for Barbarossa. But we're not doing Barbarossa at historical dates, so it is not a problem for us. Okay. Gun position 4-engine airplanes advance. Okay, that's, yeah, 42. We want to stop that. Okay, so we've got that pretty well worked out. Now let's come back here because we've now opened up enough. We can do some of this research. Yeah, that's good. And we have the last flight of Rudolph Hess. Again, talking about some of the more loony, if you will, members of the Nazi hierarchy. Okay, how do I put this? I want to be as concrete in fact and not just my speculation as possible. We know for a fact the Thule Society existed. Thule sounds cooler, at least to the American ears, but Thule, I guess, is the way it was pronounced. The Thule Society existed. It was an occultish society. Occultish societies don't necessarily have within themselves entirely 100% agreement on their occultish beliefs. So just because one person in the society believes something doesn't mean everybody else believes it, but we can generally lump in the members of the group as being occultists of some sort. And that can be a very broad spectrum of things. I want to be very clear on that. So the Thule Society definitely existed. It was definitely an occultish type society. It definitely promoted Ariostophacy. I'm trying to. It's a mixture of. It's Aryan. Aryan is in the race. Aryan theophany kind of thing. And well, Theo is God, so it's the sort of theophany. You got to get it written down here, and so I'm looking at it as I'm trying to say it. So it's this sort of Arianism would be another way to put it. But they definitely believed in that, which is a hyper racial view of Germanism. And again, it may not be just what Guido von List says, because he is definitely not a member of the Thule Society, but he's definitely an influence on these people. So it may not be what person X says, but they have all these various and sometimes conflicting beliefs even within a single person, meaning, you know, they contradict themselves in their own beliefs. So that definitely exists. This is definitely a radical racial occultist society. There's no real dispute about it. Significant members, leading members of the Thule Society formed the DAP. Rudolph Hess is definitely associated, and I'm saying this is, I believe, a complete member, but is definitely at Thule Society meetings. And I'm sort of saying this in this way. I'm pretty sure he was like a full member, but we don't necessarily have like their membership roster or whatever like that, and that has his name in it. But a few of the people that have sort of later go on to be some Nazi thinkers. One author says, "Oh well, we know he spoke at a Thule Society meeting, but that doesn't mean he was a Thule Society member." Okay, well, to a point you're splitting hairs, and a point you're not if you're just looking at pure membership. But because they were inviting, and I will grant this, that they would, they'd have meetings often in hotels, because you have a hotel sort of ballroom or meeting room or something like that, in which you can have, rent out a place to have and it was very much a middle class sort of thing. So they would go to a reasonably nice hotel, rent out a room for the an hour a day, whatever, and they'd have speakers. And so not everyone who spoke was either a member of the society or believed in the society. They just got maybe a speaker that they were interested in hearing from. So just because you can associate Speaker X with the Thule Society doesn't mean that either A, the Thule Society believes in what the speaker says, or B, the speaker believes in what the Thule Society meaning you may get an entirely non-racist person who just has some sort of occultist views that the Thule Society wants to hear them speak. So yes, totally grant that, but Rudolph Hess was very much involved in this. So he is one of these people that is very much involved with deep roots in occultism. and he is the deputy Fuhrer. He is one of Hitler's best buds. It would be, in my opinion, sort of, best buds is in who Hitler just, going to go hang with. And I mean literally sort of hang with. One of his best buds to hang with, it comes down, and it's sort of what you want to do when you hang with people. Because I've had good friends who never wanted to get, because in the olden days we didn't have these computer games. They might have wanted to play this, but learning all the rules to, the Third Reich board game was just, what? Oh, play the old original sort of Axis and Allies? Sure, yeah, and hang out and go shooting and do, So very light wargaming, they were really cool with, but playing sort of heavy war games, no. So, and then people that weren't interested in all. So, it's what you want to do. One of the people that Hitler liked to hang with, to use sort of the modern thing, was Albert Speer. And that was to talk architecture and how to redesign cities and all this other, things that Hitler was involved with. He personally liked to hang out with Speer. So we know Speer is a buddy of Hitler. This isn't a political connection. This isn't Hitler trying to social climb, Hitler trying to get respectability. This isn't Hitler trying to deal with his department heads or other people that he may or may not like, but does stuff well and whatever. Because we can see Hitler or Speer before Hitler appoints him in charge of the armaments ministry, really liking Speer. Well, Rudolph Hess goes back to Landsberg prison with Hitler, obviously before that, but he's in Landsberg prison with Hitler in the next room, and when time's up for Rudolph Hess to get out of Landsberg prison, I think I have this correct, Rudolph Hess goes, no, prison's cool, I'll stay. And he stays in prison longer than he needs to because he's helping Hitler write Mein Kampf, basically taking down what Hitler's saying. Taking notes or writing it out as Hitler's speaking it. So Hitler and Hess like each other. Hitler and Hess are buddies. Now, I've definitely had buddies that I've disagreed with on basic things, are aliens among us or whatever, and they're cool people and I like them and they're my friends, and I just may disagree with them, different points on major life issues, so Hitler may not have been an occultist. I know a few authors, there's all kinds of people say all kinds of things about Hitler. I think he definitely has occult influences. If he isn't a cultist, he definitely has occult influences in his life and in what he chooses to do. But he hangs with Hess, and Hess is deeply enmeshed in the rabid nationalist, racist, occult circles in Germany, and he's in the Thule Society before he meets Hitler. He's in the Thule Society before it forms the DAP. He's involved in forming the DAP, which, if those somewhat new here, that becomes the NSDAP in the Nazis. So, talking about all this kind of stuff, it really, really, you can't separate all of this stuff from Nazism. It just at its core. That doesn't mean Nazi farmer X or Nazi factory worker Y was an occultist and believed all this. I'm not saying that at all. I'm talking about the core upper level elements of it. Is what I'm talking about. And they don't all agree. But they also don't all agree on politics. Like in, Goebbels is, I often say, rather red. He comes out of red Berlin. He has rather socialist-type tendencies politically. Goering is an elitist. He has much more of a, I'm not going to say the C word, I'm going to say much more of the industrialist, which people often mistake for capitalism. No, he has capital, but it is often statist, what we sometimes call crony capitalism nowadays, or managed capitalism or whatever, but it's industrialist. background. So Goering is very different politically when it comes to economic situations between Goering and Goebbels. So there isn't just one Nazi ideology on this stuff. So now I'm going to save this now. Okay, so we have Rudolph Hess, the Haushoffers, father and son, are continuing to influence particularly Rudolph Hess. They, particularly the father, I believe, mostly with Hess. He is an astrologer. And Hess is, Hess, like Hitler, is a vegetarian. I think getting more towards the vegan, at least in eating elements. Hitler periodically breaks his vegetarianism with a few sort of favorite meals, but he also goes this. So, and one of the terms for Hess amongst the elites, and often I think the elites women within the greater circle of Hitler's circle of associates, is the yogi from the East. And I didn't know this until recently. I knew he was born in Alexandria, and I just thought it was sort of born in there. But he, again, and I know I've talked about this, but since we're coming up with the last flight of Rudolf Hess, he is born and lives until the age of 11 in Alexandria before he moves to Germany. So he grows up in Egypt. Now his parents are German, and I'm gathering, well, I don't know, but I'm presuming they have other local German friends, but the main sort of non-Egyptian cultural group in Alexandria, at least, well, there was a Greek, I think, sort of holdover going on a little bit still even at that point, but sort of Ottoman Empire type Greeks, not the old so much ancient Alexandrian Greeks, but is British. So I don't, so he grows up, and his parents are German, so I'm sure he has a bunch of German attitude-ish type things, but he's almost as much growing up not German, so that's why he's the yogi from the East. Alexandria is east of basically anything in Germany. Yeah. So, and so he has a lot of other influences that a lot of Germans don't have. Now, I think once he's back in Germany, it's within the sort of German milieu, so he understands the German jokes and the German cultural references, because from, 11 to 20 years older and older, he's growing up in and amongst the sort of Bavarian cultural milieu, but he has this outside influences. So he is definitely one of these people that is very much deep and influenced. And how do I put this? He is Deputy Führer. He is trusted by Hitler. He is known to be very popular. I really didn't realize how popular, because a lot of modern thought on the Nazis sort of dismiss him, partly because of this flight, and partly because of this flight, he's taken out of the critical war issues, shall we say. But he was influencing Hitler's decisions on the war, starting the war and doing that kind of stuff. He wasn't a great military, office holder like Goering was, but he's also another, Goering is doesn't seem to be touched by much of the occultism going on, but he is touched by a lot of, shall we say, scientific racism going on. Because Goering supports Heck, the guy in charge of the German or the Berlin, the German zoo system eventually, basically, but the Berlin Zoo, and trying to do the Heck cattle and some of the other Heck animals, trying to genetically reconstitute lost species. And Goering is very much into this, as well as racism. So Goering is more of a, if you will, a scientific racist as an occult, as versus an occult racist. But so we sort of dismiss, because of some of the stuff, Rudolph Hess. But before the war starts and such, really it's thought that the next, because I don't know quite, but he's a bit younger than Hitler, not a lot. Hess is the successor, sort of, to Hitler. Now, this changes as sort of Goering becomes it when he becomes Reich Marshal. And this is part of the reason being sort of pushed aside. But Hitler, you don't normally have, so he's not a flunky. He's not a sidekick guy who has no power. He is the guy who's running the NSDAP as an administrator, as a party boss. Dispute between two Gauleiters, where's the border of the Gau, or who's getting what shipments of whatnot, or I don't know. Those kind of things, they go to Hess. A dispute between two different party organizations, they go to Hess. They don't go to Hitler, at least most of the time. They go to Hess. Hess is the guy who's running the NSDAP. So you don't have a guy running the NSDAP and who's a likely successor to you if you don't think he's up to the job. If you think he's a complete loon. He's not there for comic relief. He isn't there as somebody we don't trust, we just keep in a closet and bring out to tell funny jokes and put back in the closet. No, he is actively running things. He is very popular amongst the German people. He, in his speaking role, he is the sort of the primary, the main and pre-speaker to Hitler, announcing here comes Hitler, and giving a pre-speech to it. Now sometimes there are other people introduce Hitler, depending on the kind of venue and situation, but he is the main pre-speaker, so he's on the radio all the time before Hitler, and he's personally very liked amongst the German people, where like Goebbels isn't. Goebbels isn't a warm and fuzzy person. Hess is more so for the Germans, so he's a popular sort of dude. So you don't allow a person to have all that power, all that influence, if you think he's a complete and total loon. You may think he's overdoing some things, but you're still comfortable with the direction that he's heading. At least that's sort of why. And so this really shows that we know all the times that people getting ready to put a bullet in Hitler's head, or, several army officers. Hadler, for a while, supposedly carries a pistol with him, that if he gets the chance, he's going to pull it and shoot Hitler, but then he gives up on that, and Epicrot, or whatever the hell, one of the other guys who's running part of the Westwall divisions, he's bound and determined if Hitler shows up at his headquarters, he's going to arrest him and then shoot him or something. So there's these people that think they want to do it, and then other people are actually planting bombs. I forget which one. Otto or Gregor. I get the two confused. The one that lives, the one that gets out and goes to Prague. Strasser. If you're getting confused who I'm saying. Of the Black Front. Actually sends a Jewish assassin in to assassinate Hitler, but word leaks and he's on the train going to the whatever event, riding the train with a gun to go shoot Hitler. The SS somehow leaks out because they have people in Strasser's organization, I gather. When this was when Czechoslovakia still existed. He's going to shoot Hitler. Now, of course, he could have showed up at the event and never pulled the gun, or he could have showed up at the event and tried to pull the gun and be tackled, or the bullets miss, or whatever. But he's going there to shoot Hitler, and he's a Jewish guy, seems to be pretty motivated to go do this thing. And he's stopped on the train on the way and by the SS and arrested and tortured and killed. And there's bombs, the beer Keller bomb that just barely misses Hitler, that could have killed Hitler. Could have. We say that because obviously the bomb didn't miss in the Wolf Slayer when, what's his name? The guy with the eye patch, that Tom Cruise played. The bomb goes off and he's just on the other side of the table. The blast doesn't kill him. So I'm not saying, for sure he would have been dead in the earlier one. But Hitler knows that he could be removed at any moment. And Hess is a likely successor to his movement. And he's comfortable with this. So that tells you about where the direction of Nazism is going. Okay, now this is getting long. So we gain a bunch of dissent because, hey, he's not really head of government. Hitler is the mix of head of government, head of state. But because we have the slots and the slot titles, it's now Bormann, which has a different set of, no, we can't even look to see, different set of stats. Maybe should have looked at that. So we've moved over from Deputy Führer to Reichsminister und Private Secretary of Hitler. Not really as head of government, but as sort of the manager of who has access to Hitler. And he's much more, see, during the previous time, previous to this, Bormann is definitely private secretary to Hitler and very much manages who gets to see Hitler. That is his power base. That is his primary power base. So does Brauhitsch want to see Hitler? Does Raeder want to see Hitler? Especially in the pre-war days, but even in the early war days, they've got to call Martin Bormann or his assistant, his secretary or something. I'd like an appointment to meet with Hitler. So, or Fritz Todt, I want to meet with Hitler. And so you have to go through this guy to get to this guy. So this is his main power. Now he does take over some of the functions of running the party and other things. Now he is a rabid anti-Christian and a rabid, I would say, anti-occultist. This is interesting. Previous you have rabid, maybe a bit strong, but you had a strong occultist in this slot. Now you have a rabid anti-occultist who pushes arrest the astrologers, arrest these other types of people, and they get arrested. But they're sort of put into nice Dachau arrest. A bunch of them go to nice Dachau. Not bad Dachau, nice Dachau. It's sort of, nice control, not the bad part of Dachau. Because this guy here ends up getting a bunch of these guys out, including some of the astrologers and some of the other people, out of Dachau, because he's running Dachau, to be his astrologers and to be his people. So he's sort of protecting some of the people he sort of orders release. Now, once you sort of going sort of into the Soviet war a bit more, you get this guy here now wanting to, earlier than May 41, you have astrologers told, do not make predictions about the Fuhrer or about other things like that. If you want to, make predictions about what's going to happen in a housewife's life, fine, whatever. But don't start making public predictions about the Fuhrer or other things like this. Then once the war is getting going, Goebbels, because he doesn't come from the occultist circles of Bavaria, he's coming from Berlin. But he's seeing that he knows astrology, which is still printed in many newspapers in America, the forecasts or whatever you want to call them, your daily horoscope or something. Women know about these things, trust me. It needs to be really popular. So he starts getting them reprinted astrologers, some of the people coming out of nice Dachau, and no longer many of them. Well, there's always the bad astrologers, those that predict doom for the Nazis, and these people have long since been arrested and are sometimes arrested for a while, let out, and go, you don't be bad anymore. If you start making any of these bad things, we'll arrest you again, kind of stuff. Or you just better stop being an astrologist and go work in a factory or whatever, But some of the come out of the nice Dachau, go to work for Joseph Goebbels, writing astrology articles for the German newspapers that promote up German victory for the Nazis. So while he's very much anti this, but all of the people around Hitler's circle are not Christians. That is a major, major thing. So, and then again, why some people have a lot of power, and I put people like Goering, and why you sort of want him to have a ministry, is he doesn't need to go through Bormann to get to Hitler. He can just sort of show up and get to Hitler. Again, I don't know if we can change it, and I'm not going to right away, if I could. But Speer, I don't know if he's yet on the, because I have a date for him to start. Okay. But he's not here. He's obviously around, but he's another guy that can literally I'm at the, the control gate, the front gate to the Berchtesgadens. Oh, come on in, waved in, shows up there, I don't know, I've said this before. Oh, he's going to be there for dinner? A place will be set for him. Now, Hitler may be focused on another guest or group of guests at an event like that, but Speer always has access to anything that isn't like a private meeting for Hitler. Anything that's going up to the afternoon tea at at the sort of the Eagle's Nest, the thing above the Berchtesgaden. There's sort of a tea house kind of thing. Walking up there, any of this sort of loose group that's right around Hitler, sort of the Hitler and the secretaries and some of these other aides and adjutants, and some of those come and go during this time period. But so long as that group is sort of in on whatever's going on, Speer can show up. And so Speer has this access that goes around, and that's why Speer, I have him so powerful, as well as Goering and other things, because they have access. They don't need to get through the gatekeeper. They can just come in. And at this point, I think we're going to end this episode. It has gone on overly long, so I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank you for liking the videos. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Love to see you around here more often. And, of course, please post questions, comments, suggestions, ideas, corrections. I'm sure I gave some bad information there, but I'm trying out of my memory to do the best. But if you can correct it, great. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.